evening, everybody. Tom Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully everyone's doing well. So, in case you missed it, last night we covered severe weather for the first time in a while, and it actually turned out to be a bust. It was a pretty quiet evening. There were some notable wind reports, a couple of instances of larger hail, but as far as tornadoes were concerned, we only got one confirmed report so far. I don't really expect to see anything else trickle in from that event, but the pattern does pick up after this point here. So today should be pretty quiet. Very low chance of severe weather. Shower and storm activity is going to disrupt some trick-or-treating over towards the deep south, especially if you're just to the east of the Mississippi River Valley. Over towards New Orleans as well, going to be a little bit of an issue there. And for areas just over towards the northwest, it'll be a little bit rainy. Could even see a little bit of snow up towards the UP of Michigan, maybe even northern parts of Wisconsin here before the night is out. So some interesting weather for some of us in regards to trick-or-treating or Halloween party night, depending on who you are. But in any case, though, look what happens here as we get towards the beginning of November. From the 2nd to the 4th, we now have opportunities for severe weather. The details aren't fully known on all of these, but at least towards November 2nd, which is the first of the slight risk here, we're looking mainly at a damaging wind threat as of right now. But be on your guard, because over here towards this region, these mountains often have a way of becoming a wild card, and a sneaky tornado cannot be ruled out towards these regions here. We're going to get into the details of that for a little bit, but if you live anywhere around the Amarillo, Lubbock, and Midland areas, you definitely need to be on your guard. I wouldn't be surprised if we include Fort Stockton in this right now. It's a little bit further to the south given the dynamics, but nonetheless, though, still including you. Areas a little further out towards the east. I really think your day is going to be preceding this. So as we get towards the 3rd, we have our day 4 and 5 slight risk here. But on day 4 in particular, we see some very familiar areas. We were looking at these last night over towards Oklahoma City and Norman, Wichita. But now we're looking a little further off to the west as well. We have El Reno, Fort Sill, Wichita Falls, Woodward, Oklahoma. We even have a good chunk of central Kansas in the mix. Even a good chunk of southern Nebraska that we'll have to keep an eye on as well as we continue to drag on from this point. I do think that this day we could have all hazards possible with that. And then we do have a day 5 slight risk as well right now. So that also will include areas that we actually saw yesterday. And pretty much all of those areas, and a little bit of an extension further off to the south too to go along with that. So Dallas and Waco, you're in this one for right now. We'll have to see how these areas grow, shrink, and which areas end up being pushed off to the east or even the west at this point, or the north. Pretty much at this point, anything's possible. We'll just have to keep an eye on how the models progress and where the trends end up taking us with this. So we go towards days 7 and 8. Also, another thing to note here, or 6, 7, and 8, excuse me. Also, thing to note is all of them are showing predictability too low, which is kind of a decent indicator of the active pattern that we have ahead here. So here's a look at the models here. We're doing our model comparison here. We have the GFS on the main screen. Euro will be in the bottom left corner here. The main thing we're looking for here, for the most part, is model congruency here. And the first storm system we're going to be keeping our eyes on here will be 60 hours out. So this will be Saturday evening. And you kind of see this better on the GFS more than you do the Euro in this case here. Much more pronounced shortwave in this case. So a little bit of model disparity here, but not too much here. But in any case, no matter how you look at it, we have good potential for severe setup over here towards the Texas panhandle over here. Euro kind of picks up on it as well, as we mentioned before, but shortwave not quite as pronounced, but still something else to keep an eye on as we go forward here. It's really the following day as we get into the 3rd that things kind of really ramp up here. So we move this to about 84 hours out here, and the shortwave's a little bit more prominent on the Euro, not quite as impressive, but still something that I'm going to be watching for very closely is going to be how that front overall will interact with this shortwave. I do think we're going to have a pretty good lifting mechanism across the board here as we get later into the afternoon of Sunday and into the evening hours as well. We go further along here, and you can see that those storms actually do last a while. I anticipate an MCS that'll last all the way into the early morning hours for the Midwest, and then as this trough continues to evolve, as you see this little area to the red here moving down and up towards the Midwest. This is going to help create our next chance of severe weather on Monday, where I also think all hazards will be possible once again. Do think the initiation time will be a lot earlier. I think we'll probably see a little bit after lunchtime when I think things will get going here, probably about 1 o'clock Central, as according to this right now. And it's pretty good model agreement across the board here. Euro's not really picking up on these short waves quite as well as the GFS is from the looks of it right now. But in any case, though, I still see pretty good signals across the board here. And if this ends up coming into play, especially the GFS outcome, then this is going to be a long duration event here where we could have damaging winds and probably even a couple tornadoes to go along with it, ultimately culminating with a linear event to close out the night. The threat does slightly drop off as we get towards the 5th here, but I do think that potential for severe storms will exist as well across the western parts of the Ohio Valley, but I don't expect this one to be quite as significant as of right now. Then as this trough is leaving, we get a new one to come in right behind that, and also a tropical feature to go along with that that's going to be on the edge of this ridge over here. So I'm interested to see how that pans out here. But with this coming into play here, and only the GFS is showing this, this actually will possibly impact the Carolinas over here. It doesn't look like an incredible storm though by any stretch of the imagination here as of right now, but it's definitely something I'm going to be keeping a close eye on. We'll take a look at this in the lower levels of the atmosphere, because usually towards the mid levels is where you get the best signal from this. Of course, this is only one model that we're looking at, and we'll have an update video on the tropics on Saturday. But continuing to go forward here, this is a pretty stout trough over here. Forcing mechanism, lowest area of pressure here is a little bit further to the north, so may struggle a little bit with severe weather, but I do think winter weather may come into the equation here as we go further along here. Pressure gradients are getting pretty close to that 540 mark, which is usually where that 32-degree line is. So depending on how this trends could be pretty telling as to what we get for winter weather. If we look at this on the Euro to go along with it, and this is heading towards the 204-hour mark here. Much different scenario coming into play here. Trough is all the way back towards the southwest right now. So this is where we kind of get into that no man's land zone here. And unfortunately, at this range, these are the only two models I tend to usually look at here. We'll probably try to include other models depending on how this trends from this point as we get further along here. But in any case, though, we do see that winding up, and that 540 line does pop up eventually around the Great Lakes. So I do anticipate some winter weather coming into play here. We may even do a winter weather stream depending on how this pans out. But in any case, though, you can see right after this point, another trough coming in. Digs pretty far to the south, so maybe a Texas setup coming into play right before the mid-month closes in. And then we also have another feature that might be coming in right around the 15th into the 16th. While not the most impressive feature that I've seen, still, it's the early warning signals here that we have to keep an eye on from this point. But that being said, let's go ahead and switch over to the 700 millibar range here. And basically what we're doing at this range is going to be confirming how our short waves look. No two models on this one. We're just going to be going with GFS from this point. Euro's kind of not in great agreement with this, so it's not a reason to really look at it right now. But we will be doing more model comparisons in future videos. This is heading into Saturday afternoon here. Pretty pronounced shortwave over here, and a little sneaky secondary area that pops up over here towards northeastern Oklahoma City and over towards southeastern Kansas. We'll keep an eye on as well. Dynamics just aren't really there, so I'm not super concerned about severe weather, but we'll keep an eye on that. I would not be surprised to see marginal risk there, if not, or more even possibly. So got a nice little MCS that holds out over towards the region just before the next line of storms come in. Very pronounced shortwave over towards the Texas-Oklahoma border here as we head into Sunday afternoon. And like I said, I really think that this might be a sleeping giant in regards to tornado potential here. But of course, other factors come into play. And as we get closer towards this date, I think we'll be making a video strictly about this particular event before all said and done here. Then as we continue to go forward, you can see the short waves being indicated very profoundly on the GFS as we go towards the 5th, heading towards the 6th. By the time we get towards the 5th, by Tuesday afternoon here, the threat's not profound, but there is something that could be had there. We'll have to keep an extra close eye on that. It's going to be one of those sneaky little damaging wind threats, I think, as of right now. Of course, with 132 hours out at this point, by the time all would be said and done, still a lot to keep track of here. So going to take that with a grain of salt a little bit here. Next trough comes in. You can see more potential for severe weather, mainly towards the Midwest as we get towards the 7th and the 8th. Timing is definitely going to be a factor before all is said and done. I think the Ohio Valley will become a point of interest as well. Here's that tropical feature to go along with it. You see a feature try to develop over here towards the Gulf too. Maybe a couple of different chances for development, but so far the one that's further out towards the Atlantic looks like the best chance as of right now. Again, we'll make a tropical outlook video this weekend to kind of verify everything. But as we continue to go forward here, look how well wrapped up this low is at the mid levels here. So pretty dynamic storm looks like it's going to be taking shape here as we get towards the 10th, heading into the 11th. Looks like a quick mover though, so I don't expect snowfall totals to be significant with this as of right now. And again, like I said before, 300 hours out, really only one model to compare at this point, so a lot is up in the air at this moment in time. So we continue to go forward here. Here's that last setup that we were looking at just past the 300-hour mark towards Texas that we're going to be watching very closely. Then the southern Mississippi Valley here, deep south, could be a point of interest too before all is said and done. Looking at the thermodynamic environment ahead here, we're going back to our own little special combination plot here. We're going to be looking at the dew points along with the surface temperatures. What we're looking for is continuity between the moisture return and the warm sector that we'll have available in the events to come here. So we're going to be mainly just honing in on particular dates here. So of course the first one's going to be 60 hours out like we had talked about. And there's two things I'm mainly looking for, regardless of whether it's the temperature map or the dew point map here. And we're looking mainly for these little blotted out points within the temperature map here. Those are where our storms are firing. And then also on the dew point map, we're looking for a really sharp contrast between the area of dry air, which is going to be these areas in the brown, versus these areas in the green and the blue here. Usually those are going to be good points of lift. Those are where the storms often start to fire. And the further that we get into these areas in the blue, usually will promote a much better environment for storm growth beyond that point. But as you can see here, there's not a sharp contrast on the second here. I really think potential for that more so comes in on the third here. Also, I don't see anything super sharp here on the temperature map here, which would also be an indicator of a front. So move on to the next day here, and then you can clearly see that we have a much more stout contrast here. Not the sharpest of contrasts that I've seen here. The 60-degree dew points are here, and looking at the dew points over here, we're at about 40. So not a bad contrast, but not as sharp as maybe areas a little further to the south. If we can get those dynamics a little further up to the north, then we could really be in business here in regards to severe weather here. But looking at the temperature map here, you can also see the presence of a front beginning to make itself a little bit more pronounced. Still, you have a nice little warm sector that pops out just a little bit ahead where we're getting those 75-degree plus temperatures over here. Maybe some of these areas may sneak into the 80s here before all is said and done. But we're still not done with the front yet. And also we have another more notable day ahead here. And I really think Monday is the sleeping giant here potentially. Very sharp moisture return here as we get into Monday afternoon. We get even some 70-degree dew points here. Those little specks in the purple are ones to watch in particular. And we compare that along with the temperature outlook to go with it. As you can see, we have these areas just before the storms come in. They're in the mid 70s again, so pretty good environment thermodynamically speaking, at least from the temperature and the dew point perspective. There are other factors that we'll have to take a look at, but this could easily turn into like a 30 to 40 minute video if I go over every little detail right now. But in any case though, we continue to move forward here. You can see that we still have really good moisture returns, and this is why I still think the Tuesday setup has a chance here. You can see the frontal boundary going along with that here, so still have our point of lift here. We have some wind shear to work with, especially towards the mid levels, so not out of the woods if you're in the Ohio Valley here. There are some factors working against it, but I don't think that the threat with that is zero at this time. So continue to go forward here, trudge along, and you can see continuous instances where we have those temperatures and dew points coming into play and helping and aiding our severe weather setups further down the line. Really interesting look here is when we get past Tuesday, past the Tuesday setup, looking towards the 7th and the 8th, where we have that cold air starting to swirl in from that storm system there. This is where we start to get that winter weather threat coming into play. So I do think that, again, with this setup, we start to look maybe over towards the plains and also the deep south a bit more for severe weather as we get further along into the month here. So busy times definitely are looking like they are ahead here. So here is another feature I like to look at when it comes to active times ahead here. This kind of verifies everything that we've just talked about here, and this is what you call the average lightning flash density indicator here. Whenever we get these bright colored areas here, that's usually a good idea of where we're going to have stronger thunderstorm activity here. As you can see, that even today, even though there's not necessarily severe risk, you see the activity here, and if you look on the radar, you already know that there's storms ongoing in this area right now at the time of this video. So as we continue to go forward here, this is over towards the 2nd. Look at the activity that we have over here towards the southwest. So we continue to go forward here, we see that progress into the Texas, Oklahoma region. It really starts to ramp up as we get into Sunday. Then Monday, it really peaks over here. We start to get density over towards about maybe 8 to 10 strikes per day. Probably going to actually be a lot more in reality, but in any case, though, it does look like the business of severe weather will be picking up here. For all is said and done here, we have another setup over towards Texas just before the 7th, heading into the 8th here, and eventually we'll see the deep south coming into play before all is said and done. Keep in mind that this is the Euro, so the timing is slightly different from what the GFS is showing. GFS does not have this feature on here, unfortunately. Alright, so finally getting close towards the end of the video here. We have one more combination plot here, and this is just basically looking at the different types of instability that we have available. We have the surface cape here on the main screen, mixed layer cape is on the bottom left corner here. These, of course, are from the GFS and the Euro, so as we get further along, the timing is going to be altered just a little bit here. But as we look at the GFS here, you can see as we get towards the 2nd here, which is the first instance of severe weather here, we have actually a decent amount of instability here, and I think this is what's going to help drive that system forward here. Definitely with this amount of instability, this definitely kind of leans to the favor of damaging winds and hail here. Tornado threat's still very much possible, but I think that this really aids all hazards, truthfully. But the kinematics just don't really seem like that they're there, or they're really more, I would say, a question mark at this current point in time. We'll have to watch the trends over the next couple of days to see how things go from there. Of course, you can see the same thing on the Euro here as we get towards that 60-hour mark here. You have solid mixed layer cape, but nothing that really stands out to me as much. Remember, of course, these are two different models, so a little bit of variance to be had there. So we go towards the Sunday setup here, looking at the surface cape here. Pretty modest amount of cape here. Towards some of these areas a little further off to the north, it's a little bit more impressive, especially towards the Oklahoma, Kansas area, so that could be a point of interest. So we get towards the the European here. Start to get a little bit hard to keep up with everything here. You can see that even the mixed layers showing both Oklahoma, Kansas line here is a point of interest in regards to instability. As we get towards Monday, of course, the signal starts to fade out because these global models are not the best when it comes to looking at instability readings here. But really, at this range, this is all I have to work with here. Euro's kind of on the inside of things here in regards to signals. So more videos will be made on these dates beyond this point here. But we'll go ahead and close it out by just kind of taking a look at the signals we could have further along here. And you can see with both of these that we do still have some relatively prominent signals, especially given the time frame that we're looking at here. So definitely plenty to keep our eyes open for as we go further along here. Of course, as we get further along, I have less and less confidence in the signals, and then of course the signals are a little less apparent given the fact that we're looking almost 16 days out in advance, or 10 to 16 days out in advance, as I should say. But in any case, though, plenty to keep track of before all is said and done here. So final thing to look at here, of course, is what our precipitation is going to look like now. So it's a pretty good view of our current picture. Like I said, we have a little bit of snowfall going over here towards the UP and northern Wisconsin. We're going to expect that to continue as we head into the evening and overnight hours. And then eventually that's going to drop off. Then here comes our next storm system here. It's heading into the second. This is where we have that southwest setup. And then before we know it, we have a new setup for the third here. This looks like a interesting little mud ball thunderstorms here. And it could be a muddy situation here too, because this area recently just got hit with a storm system, and flash flooding may become more and more of a factor as we continue to get more weather systems over the region here. Also take note of the snow that's starting to develop over here as we get over towards Colorado. Then we see this linear event, and this is kind of backing up my thoughts on this upcoming Tuesday here. I think it's still conditional, but I do think damaging winds will very much be possible with this as well before all said and done. Then this is where the tropics kind of come into play here. A lot of question marks with that as to what happens with these two areas. It seems like this area ends up hitting the Carolinas, and this area kind of just hangs off of Florida and fizzles out from that point. Even so, it does look like we end up having a good bit of rain over here towards Florida before all is said and done. Then we start to shift into winter mode as we get into the 8th and into the 9th. We have a pretty notable system over here towards the Great Lakes, especially towards Lake Michigan, where we could maybe even get all three of the freezing precipitation modes. We could get some freezing rain, we may even get some sleet. Of course, there's other factors that kind of bore into that, so a little bit of variance ahead with that. But in any case here, we even get some snow starting to linger into the northeast here as that low pressure deepens here. We have some cold air left on the backside of it. So maybe even over towards Maine, maybe Vermont, New Hampshire, and other areas could see some wind-free precip before all is said and done with that system. And after that point, we have another one coming in. This one is going to be a Texas setup here. Looks pretty linear right now, but we always have to be on watch for other factors coming into play, maybe even including some prefrontal cells, depending on how variables pan out here. Of course, 300 hours out, it's still very questionable at this point. And then at this point, we end up having a little bit more in the way of winter weather activity here with this system tracking off to the north here. But we'll have to see how things pan out from that point. Also, a big topic, of course, as we mentioned before, is going to be a cool down over towards the northeast towards the middle part of the month. If you want to see more details on that, check out the winter outlook that'll be on the top right hand corner. With that being said, I know it's a lengthy video here. We'll have timestamps in the description here. I want to say I appreciate you guys for tuning in, especially over the last couple of days. We're getting back on schedule here finally, so look forward to more videos here. But anyway, it's been Tired Weatherman. You all take care and have a good rest of your Halloween night.